You're listening to Dark Rain Chronicles. The rain hides many things, but it also remembers. Secrets washed away, voices swallowed by the storm. These are the stories it brings back, and tonight, you will hear them. Arrival drifted in on the day's fading light. The hotel lobby greeted me not with welcome, but with an exhalation of undisturbed decay. The scent of time-stilled dust and dormant upholstery thick in the air. Behind the scarred expanse of the check-in counter stood Silas, a gaunt custodian of the stillness, who processed my presence with eyes resolutely downcast and the barest murmur of inquiry before sliding a brass key across the wood. A prickle of disquiet traced my spine, immediate and sharp, yet exhaustion gnawed deeper, a physical ache demanding surrender. Faint whispers of the establishment's reputation gleamed peripherally, dissolved against the urgent, primal need for rest, for the simple solace of a bed and the cleansing scald of hot water. That necessity eclipsed all else. Ascent occurred within a shuddering metal cage, the fourth floor approaching with glacial reluctance as the overhead light pulsed, a faltering heartbeat in the gloom. My temples throbbed. The rationale for this entire business trip felt thin, brittle. I stepped out onto a corridor swathed in shadows, the carpet beneath my feet worn to threads, punctuated by stains of cryptic origin. Low wattage bulbs cast a jaundiced pall over everything. The door to my assigned room seemed an artifact from an earlier, rougher time, its brass knob mottled with verdigris, the wood near the floor deeply scarred, as if something had clawed its way in, or perhaps out. The key met resistance in the lock, a brief metallic argument, before the mechanism yielded with a tired internal click. Inside, the air hung heavy, a palpable fusion of settled dust and the sharp, lingering ghost of cheap antiseptic. A narrow bed clung to the right wall. Opposite, a hulking wardrobe stood sentinel in one corner. The bathroom door, visibly warped, refused to latch properly without a forceful yank. Through the single window, no streetscape offered itself, only the impassive brick face of the neighboring edifice, a blind eye swallowing the meager light and reflecting nothing. Claustrophobia, subtle but present, breathed coolly on my neck. I deposited my suitcase onto a rickety table near the bed, liberating a few work shirts from its confines, the mundane thought of pressing them later. A frail anchor dropped into the unsettling quiet. Seeking refuge, or perhaps just ritual, I went to the bathroom. The glare from the single bulb above the basin was merciless, carving the small space into zones of harsh light and profound shadow. I bent, splashing cold water onto travel-weary skin, the shock momentarily grounding. Straightening, my eyes met the mirror and registered a flicker of wrongness. My reflection stared back, undeniably me, yet subtly undone. The edges of my face softened into an unnatural blur, my hairline indistinct, the very shape of my ears seeming to waver, as if the silvering behind the glass were flawed or slowly melting. My fingers traced the cool, smooth surface. No condensation, no visible scratch or warp explained the distortion. A brisk wipe with a towel changed nothing. Dismissing it as merely cheap glass, another symptom of the hotel's pervasive neglect, I pushed the unease aside and retreated to the main room. Unpacking concluded, My attention drifted towards the small television mounted on the wall, a black rectangle promising distraction. It offered only a brief electronic spasm upon activation before surrendering to darkness, utterly unresponsive to further commands from the remote. The device landed on the thin coverlet with a sigh of resignation. Perhaps a different room was available, or assistance with the television. Downstairs beckoned. Opening the room door unleashed an abrupt, localized iciness that crawled over my bare arms. Peculiar, sourceless, vanishing as quickly as it came. Shrugging it off as an odd draft, I walked towards the elevator. The lobby below was deserted. Silas was absent from his post. The door to the small back office, a dark aperture revealing nothing within. A tentative tap on the counter echoed, swallowed by a heavy silence that felt profound, unusual even for a languid hotel after dark. Patience frayed quickly. Defeated, I summoned the elevator once more and ascended back into the gloom. Emerging again onto the 4th floor, a sliver of darkness marked my door. It stood slightly ajar. A cold certainty clashed with the sight. I knew. I had closed it securely. A different kind of chill, this one internal, washed through me. Tentatively, heart beginning a heavier rhythm, I pushed the door inward. My belongings remained undisturbed, the suitcase placid on its table, clothes untouched. Yet the bathroom door gaped wide, its harsh light spilling into the bedroom, a light I distinctly recalled extinguishing before my descent. Sweat began to bead on my palms. Fatigue. I insisted silently. It had to be fatigue playing tricks. I reached into the bathroom, flicked off the light, forced the warped door shut until it caught, then turned the deadbolt on the main entrance with a decisive, heavy thud. Night seeped through the brick-filled window, absolute and swift. Hunger gnawed. A call placed to the front desk for room service was met with crackling static, then a curt, disembodied voice informing me the kitchen was closed. Closed. It was barely 8 in the evening. The line clicked dead before I could argue. The prospect of venturing out again felt daunting, exhausting. A protein bar salvaged from my bag served as a poor substitute for dinner, washed down with tap water that carried a faint, metallic tang of rust and indifference. Changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt, lights extinguished, I slid between sheets that felt unnervingly clammy, cool against my skin despite the stuffy air. The room's ambient temperature seemed to plummet, raising goose flesh anew. I reached for the thin blanket folded at the foot of the bed. It offered scant comfort, negligible warmth. Sleep remained elusive, chased away by an insidious sound, beginning just at the edge of hearing. A susurrus, feather light seeming to shape my name. My name. Repeated, softly, persistently. My heartbeat hammered against my ribs as I strained to listen, to pinpoint the source. Not the hallway, surely. Not the wind. The old building held its breath, utterly still. Yet the whisper persisted, a sibilant loop cycling just beyond full comprehension, disturbingly intimate, undeniably chilling. My throat felt dry, my head light. Clamping my eyes shut, burrowing into the thin pillow, I mentally fought the sound, praying for the oblivion of sleep. Eventually, sheer exhaustion claimed me. Consciousness snapped back with jarring abruptness. Midnight glowed accusingly from my watch face. The murmur hadn't ceased. It seemed embedded now within the very walls, interwoven with a faint, rhythmic tapping. Faulty plumbing, perhaps. old pipes protesting in the night. The air pressed close, thick and stagnant. The damp chill of the sheets seemed to have intensified, clinging to my skin. Clammy. I sat bolt upright, fumbling for the switch on the bedside lamp. Its sudden, weak glow illuminated a subtly altered space. Or was it my perception? Did the walls lean inward slightly? Was the hulking wardrobe canted at a new, impossible angle? My breathing grew shallow, ragged. A profound reluctance to leave the relative sanctuary of the bed warred with a desperate need to clear my head, to splash water on my face. Finally, driven by the latter, I swung my legs over the side and moved towards the bathroom. The overhead light, when flicked on, assaulted my sleep-sensitized eyes. Then, the mirror. My reflection swam there, distorted as before, blurred at the edges. But this time, something else. Behind my indistinct shoulder, hovering near the stained shower curtain, lingered an amorphous shadow, a patch of deeper night within the brightly lit room, seeming to undulate slightly at its edges. Not human, not recognizable, just a presence made manifest as absence of light. A tremor started in my hand, traveling up my arm. I whirled around. The shower alcove stood vacant, tiles gleaming wetly under the harsh light. Whipping back to the mirror, the shape had vanished. My breath hitched. My pulse hammered a frantic tattoo in my ears. Mechanically, I bent to the basin, splashing my face with water that felt glacial, shocking my system, my teeth beginning to chatter uncontrollably. As I dried off with a small, rough hand towel, that phantom breeze, utterly inexplicable, caressed the nape of my neck, raising every hair on my arms. Leaning in close, I scrutinized the mirror's surface again, searching for flaws, water spots, anything to explain the persistent distortion. Nothing. Yet my image remained subtly smeared, like a lagging video feed struggling to resolve. A hand pressed flat against my chest, trying to calm the frantic bird trapped within my ribs. Slow, shaky breaths in the too bright, too cold room. Returning to the main bedroom area, the thought of fresh air became an imperative, a desperate craving. The window, however, refused collaboration. Though the latch was clearly disengaged, the sash remained immovably sealed within its ancient frame, resisting all my straining efforts until my arms ached with frustrating futility. I gave up, defeated. The pervasive cold in the room felt intrinsic, emanating not from any discernible draft, but seemingly radiating from the very plaster and wood surrounding me. Escape. The thought solidified. I ventured back out into the corridor's jaundiced, silent light. Emptiness reigned. The elevator indicator remained stubbornly frozen on a floor above. Down the hallway, the heavy fire door that should have offered access to the stairs proved impassable, securely locked from this side. A baffling, deeply alarming detail for any public lodging. Panic tightened its grip, cold and suffocating. Retreating once more to the dubious safety of my room, I lifted the phone receiver, only to be met with dead air, a hollow void where a dial tone should have been. My mobile phone offered no solace, displaying only no service. A final, chilling severance from the outside world, from help, from normalcy. I began pacing the shrinking confines of the room, the walls seeming to press closer with every turn. Another futile attempt at the television yielded only its blank, unresponsive stare. My watch showed it was now past 1 in the morning. Retrieving a small flashlight from my suitcase, I doused the weak overhead light, deciding to investigate the hulking wardrobe. Perhaps extra blankets were stored within, some small comfort against the deepening chill. Its door groaned open under my touch. Inside, a lone skeletal wire hanger, and incongruously, tucked into the back corner, a forgotten piece of luggage. It was an old, hard-sided suitcase, shrouded in a thick gray mantle of dust, bearing faded, almost illegible initials embossed on its side. As the flashlight beam lingered on this unexpected relic, that familiar icy current breathed past my shoulder, startlingly close. Whirling around, finding nothing but empty air, my skin erupted in prickles. I retreated hastily, shutting the wardrobe door firmly, resolving to leave the derelict suitcase and its secrets undisturbed. As the door clicked shut, the susurrus returned, louder now, more insistent. My name spoken clearly in a flat, affectless monotone that seemed to originate from nowhere and everywhere at once. Resolve hardened into desperation. Leave. Now. Regardless of the hour, regardless of the locked stairs, but opening the room door revealed a corridor in alarming flux. The already dim light stuttered violently, casting distorted, elongated shadows that writhed and jerked along the walls like frantic marionettes, untethered to any visible source. I forced myself towards the elevator shaft at the end of the hall. The indicator remained immobile. Repeated, frantic jabs at the call button brought no response. No reassuring rumble of machinery. The whispering intensified, seeming to press physically against my eardrums. Retreat. There was nowhere else. Back inside the room, door slammed shut, body racked with uncontrollable tremors. My throat constricted, making it hard to breathe. I tore the thin covers from the bed, dragging them with me to the floor, where I huddled against the wall, wrapping the flimsy cotton around myself like inadequate armor. Around 2 in the morning, the single overhead light fixture, which I'd switched back on, sputtered violently and died, plunging the room into a deeper, more absolute darkness, relieved only by the feeble circle cast by the bedside lamp and the narrow beam of my flashlight. The whispers seemed to shift then, coalescing into a dry, scraping sound, like fingernails being drawn slowly across rough wood. Leaping to my feet, I swept the flashlight beam around the room, heart pounding. The wardrobe. Its door hung slightly ajar. Again. Pulse deafening in my ears. I approached it cautiously, hand outstretched to push it closed once more. The wood emitted a low, protesting creak under my touch. Inside, the beam revealed only empty shelves, but out of the corner of my eye, a peripheral flicker, a suggestion of swift movement in the deepest shadows. I froze, holding my breath, probing the darkness with the light. Nothing. Backing away slowly, my gaze fell upon the bathroom door. It stood open. The light inside blazed. Again. My legs felt heavy, leaden, my knees threatening to buckle as I forced myself to move towards it, one slow step at a time. As I drew closer, a low hum became audible, emanating from within the bathroom. A persistent, monotonous, almost electronic whine. Hand trembling on the doorknob, I cautiously peered inside. The mirror above the basin offered only absolute, impenetrable blackness. A void where my reflection, the room, the light itself should have been. Reaching out tentatively, my fingertips brushed the glass. It felt colder than ice, a shocking, unnatural chill. Then within that black, vacant plane, something slid. A swift, dark movement passing across the space where my reflected background should have been, visible only as a fleeting disturbance against the utter darkness. My chest constricted violently. I yanked my hand back as if burned, slamming the bathroom door shut with all my strength. The whispering surged instantly, overwhelmingly loud now, immediate, intimate, seeming to curl directly into my left ear. Tears blurred my vision. Breath came in ragged, insufficient gasps. Enough. This was unbearable. Jacket snatched from the chair, keys frantically sought, fingers rummaging desperately through the contents of my suitcase. The stairs, locked or not, were the only way. Out in the corridor again, I launched a renewed assault on the heavy stairwell door, pulling and straining until my shoulders ached, until sweat dripped into my eyes. It remained stubbornly, impossibly locked. Banging my fists against the solid wood elicited only silence from beyond. The corridor lights continued their frantic, epileptic flickering, the dancing, sourceless shadows mocking my desperation along the far wall, seeming to writhe and retreat around the corner. A frantic dash back towards the elevator, hammering the call button with the heel of my hand. A groan from the depths of the shaft, a grinding protest of ancient machinery. Then, movement. The indicator light began its slow descent. Relief, fragile and momentary, surged through me, even as my heart hammered against my ribs. The doors eventually parted, revealing a dimly lit, mold-scented car. I scrambled inside, stabbing the button for the lobby. The doors slid shut, sealing me in. The cage rattled, vibrated, then lurched violently, stopping dead between floors. Utter darkness swallowed the flashlight's beam for a terrifying second before I fumbled it back on, pounding fists against the cold metal doors, my voice cracking into a choked shout. Tears streamed freely now, hot against my cold skin. The whisper filled the confined space, relentless. My name a chilling, inescapable mantra repeated over and over. A wave of intense cold air washed over my face, stealing my breath. Fumbling frantically for the control panel in the dark, my fingers slipped on the smooth buttons, finding no purchase, eliciting no response. An eternity seemed to pass in that suspended, whispering darkness. Then, another violent jolt, and movement resumed, sluggishly. The elevator shuddered to a halt. The doors slid open onto the fourth floor hallway. My room door stood wide open down the corridor, a dark maw beckoning or warning. Disbelief warred with a rising tide of terror. The elevator hadn't ascended. It had merely cycled back, delivering me precisely where I started. Sweat stung my eyes, my shirt plastered cold against my back. I stabbed desperately at the door open button, but the doors slid inexorably shut, the car ascending silently, abandoning me on the threshold of nightmare. Stranded. No recourse remained but a return to the room. As I walked towards it, dread heavy in my steps, the open door swung silently shut just before I reached it. A final, deliberate act. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I reached for the knob. It felt unnaturally warm, almost feverish to the touch. The impulse to turn back, to flee down the empty corridor towards the locked stairs, was strong, but there was nowhere else to go. Slowly, bracing myself, I twisted the knob. It clicked open without resistance. Inside, the darkness was absolute. Even the faint glow from the bedside lamp was extinguished now. I stepped cautiously over the threshold. The door clicked shut behind me with soft finality. The silence within was profound, the whispers momentarily gone, replaced only by that faint, dry scraping sound, seeming to emanate from the direction of the wardrobe. Flashlight beam cutting a nervous path through the blackness, I took small, shuffling steps towards the bed. The wardrobe door, I noted with a fresh jolt of fear, was now inexplicably closed again, yet it seemed to vibrate faintly, rattling softly against its frame in the utter stillness. How long? How long until sunrise offered its potential reprieve? Survival became the only coherent thought, the only possible strategy. I perched rigidly on the extreme edge of the bed, clutching the flashlight like a talisman, teeth chattering uncontrollably in the swirling, unnatural cold that permeated the room. A quick glance confirmed the bathroom door remained mercifully shut. Then, a subtle shift beside me. The mattress dipped, compressed slightly, as if under an unseen weight. I scrambled backwards off the bed in sheer panic, the flashlight beam stabbing wildly at the empty space. Nothing. No one. Yet the indentation lingered for a heartbeat, a visible depression in the thin coverlet before slowly, impossibly, smoothing itself out. A profound numbness spread through me then, a paralysis born of sheer terror. I retreated to the far wall, back pressed hard against the cool plaster, flashlight beam fixed unwaveringly on the bed, waiting, until, finally, agonizingly, the first frail hint of gray light began to filter through a tiny crack in the heavy curtains, diluting the oppressive blackness, rendering the room fractionally less malevolent, stripping the shadows of some of their depth. Action surged through the lingering fear, propelled by adrenaline. Belongings were thrown haphazardly, frantically, into the open suitcase, wrinkles and order utterly irrelevant. I approached the door. It opened without protest this time. The hallway outside seemed blessedly mundane now, the lights steady, the shadows behaved, inert. I rushed to the elevator, stabbed the button, uttering a silent prayer. It arrived with surprising promptness, its interior blessedly normal. This time, it descended without incident, taking me straight to the lobby. The doors slid open onto a scene of prosaic normalcy. Silas, the gaunt clerk, presided over his counter, seemingly absorbed in paperwork, bathed in the weak morning light filtering through the dusty front windows. Words tumbled out of me, clumsy and breathless, checking out. He offered no query, no flicker of curiosity in his downcast eyes, merely presented a folded bill. I paid it without looking, the amount irrelevant. Then, escape. Bursting through the heavy front doors into the nascent morning, gulping great lungfuls of air that felt clean, crisp, blessedly real. I didn't look back. Not once. Into the anonymous shelter of my rental car, the engine roaring to life felt like a resurrection. The scheduled business meeting, the entire purpose of the trip, evaporated from my mind, utterly insignificant. I drove, just drove, hands trembling on the steering wheel, eyes flicking compulsively, nervously, to the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the grim facade receding behind me. Away from that building, putting miles between myself and the suffocating cold, the mirror's impossible void, the insidious whisper of my own name. Eventually, another hotel was found, nestled amidst the reassuring bustle and noise of a crowded part of town. The explanation for the night's events remained elusive, locked away in the irrational terror of those hours. But the feeling, the bone-deep chill that lingered, the phantom touch of cold air, the memory of that voice, that was undeniably real. Getting out, escaping that room, was everything. It remains everything. A discordant note struck the quiet symphony of my second night within those old brick confines. Supine in bed, the day's labors weighing heavy, I registered a faint, dry friction from above. It whispered like sandaled feet dragging across bare floorboards. My initial thought, the tenant overhead, faltered as the sound persisted. A slow, deliberate cadence, less walking than hesitant pacing. The building's formidable walls usually muffle the world. No murmur of voices, no television's drone. Only this soft, insistent scrape. 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 A tremor ran along my nerves, yet exhaustion eventually claimed me. Morning found me unsettled, a residue of the night's peculiarity clinging. If it recurred, I resolved, investigation was warranted. My own dwelling occupied the second level of the three-tiered structure. The uppermost floor hosted but a single apartment. The proprietor, Ms. Arbor, had mentioned a man residing there upon my moving in, though sight of him remained elusive. The building itself was a relic of weathered red brick, its narrow staircase groaning selectively underfoot. Hallway paint, once beige, had surrendered to a jaundiced fade, overseen by a lone, buzzing overhead bulb. Doors, thick and imposing, yielded only to a stubborn turn of their heavy brass knobs. On my third night, the sound returned. Engrossed in a flickering drama on my laptop screen, I paused, head tilted. The scraping traversed the ceiling above, a languid journey. A quickening beat began in my chest. Rising, I mounted my sofa, pressing an ear against the cool plaster. Faint, undeniably, but present. Complaining felt premature. It was barely 9. The noise hardly intrusive, merely aberrant. After a time, silence reclaimed the space. I sought sleep, a strange knot in my stomach resisting ease. Days slipped by, the noise returning erratically. Sometimes it greeted the dawn before my departure for work. Other times, it summoned me from sleep near midnight. Always the same signature, the soft drag of steps across the floor. A pause, the drag resuming. Never the punctuation of an opening or closing door. Never a human voice. Only footfalls. The strangest occurrence unfolded one evening upon my late return. Past 11, fatigue blurring the edges of the world, I climbed the protesting stairs. My key turned. The heavy door clicked shut behind me with its customary finality, a sound that always felt too loud in the quiet building. The timed hallway light still hummed. Shedding my coat, kicking off shoes, setting down my bag. It was then I heard them. Footsteps on the stairs, descending from the 3rd floor. Assuming it was the phantom neighbor, I pulled my door open again, a greeting forming on my lips. The corridor stretched vacant, yet the steps continued their descent, drawing nearer. My stomach clenched. Rooted in the doorway, I listened as the distinct sound of footfalls passed the very space where a person should have stood, continuing down towards the ground level before ceasing entirely. A chill traced patterns on my skin. My heart hammered against my ribs. I retreated, locking the door, leaning back against the solid wood. Perhaps, I reasoned desperately, the sound traveled oddly through the building's ancient veins. The plumbing, maybe. But the pipes were habitually silent. No clanking radiators or humming conduits disturbed the quietude. Only those slow, phantom steps. Over the following week, I broached the subject with Ms. Arbor. A shrug met my concerns. No prior complaints, she stated. adding the upstairs tenant was seldom present. Moving furniture, perhaps. The suggestion felt hollow. This wasn't the scrape and bump of shifting possessions. It possessed the steady, rhythmic quality of ambulation. I queried Mrs. Gable, the first-floor resident. A polite denial met my inquiry. Her smile seemed painted on, her reluctance to engage palpable, so I let it rest. My attention sharpened towards the hallway's nuances. The stairs creaked, yes, but inconsistently. The overhead light occasionally flickered with nervous energy. The third-floor apartment door appeared utterly mundane. Standard peephole, plain doormat. One evening, feeling faintly absurd, I pressed my ear to its wood, straining for any sign of life within. Nothing. A soft rap yielded no response. Unwilling to trespass further, I retreated to my own space. Thereafter, the footsteps gained frequency. No discernible schedule governed their appearances, yet scarcely a day passed without their visitation. Sometimes they commenced upon my return near 6. Other times, they manifested near midnight or deeper into the small hours. Always that same laborious dragging sound, evocative of someone walking without properly lifting their feet. It frayed my nerves raw. I'd freeze mid-motion, listening intently, trying to triangulate their origin. My ceiling, the hallway, the stairs. They seemed almost to float, yet always adhered to that slow, deliberate pattern. One Friday night, patience expired. Seated at my small kitchen table, consuming a solitary sandwich, the scraping began overhead. I surged to my feet, snatching my keys, resolve hardening. I would intercept whoever, whatever, was responsible. I ascended the stairs to the third floor, the building wrapped in silence, save for the light fixture's low hum. Approaching the apartment door, I pressed my ear against it once more. Profound silence. Heart fluttering with a mix of anxiety and trespass, I gently tested the doorknob. Unyielding brass. The impulse to knock warred with a sudden, inexplicable unease. Turning, I descended back to the second floor, pausing on the landing. The air felt unnaturally cold. My breath came quick and shallow. Goose flesh prickled my arms. Silence. Utter stillness, as if the building itself held its breath. I locked myself inside my apartment, bathing the small space. Living room flowing into a tiny kitchen, short corridor, bath, bedroom, an electric light. The walls seemed a paler shade of off-white. Through the aged blinds of the living room window, streetlights cast long shadows, punctuated by the sweep of passing headlights. Minutes passed as I stood, adrift. Finally, I sank onto the sofa, summoning the television's low murmur for companionship, though my ears remained acutely tuned to the silence, my chest tight, eyes darting towards the door. Hours later, preparing for bed, the footsteps returned. This time, however, they originated outside in the hallway, slow steps ascending the stairs. My heart leaped, pounding a frantic rhythm. I crept to my own front door, listening intently through the wood. The footfalls reached my landing, paused directly outside. I held my breath, palms slick with sweat. Then, they continued their journey, climbing towards the third floor. No voice accompanied them. No shadow slipped beneath the door. No tangible presence betrayed itself. A profound chill permeated my core. The urge to fling the door open battled with a paralyzing tension. After a minute stretched taut, I quietly engaged the deadbolt. Another minute crawled by before I dared press my ear to the door again. Silence reigned. The following morning dawned gray, mirroring my sleep-deprived state. I decided on surveillance. Fetching a small folding chair from my living room, I positioned it near my door in the hallway. For nearly an hour that evening, I sat there, feigning absorption in my phone, eyes flicking periodically towards the stairs. No one appeared. The corridor offered only the faint, lingering scent of old wood polish and profound stillness. Feeling foolish, yet increasingly frustrated, I retreated inside. Later, around 10, the steps manifested again. They seemed to originate from the ground floor this time, working their way upwards with that familiar, halting gait. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. Pause. My body tensed instinctively. Phone clutched tight. I eased my door open a fraction. The hallway yawned empty. Leaning out, I peered down the stairwell. Nothing. Yet the footsteps climbed relentlessly. They reached the second-floor landing. Stopped. The air grew thick, heavy. I stood frozen. Breath caught in my throat. The phone's screen illuminating the passing seconds. Then, the sound resumed, ascending the final flight towards the third floor. Once they reached the summit, absolute quiet descended. I tiptoed back into my apartment, secured the lock, and collapsed onto the sofa, legs trembling. The emptiness of the hallway replayed in my mind. No one there. Yet the steps had been undeniable, distinct, possessing an audible weight that elicited faint creaks from the aged floorboards. A shiver traced its way up my arms. I stared at my locked door, mind grappling futilely for reason. I tried inquiring again. A knock on Mrs. Gable's door yielded only a sliver of opening. Nothing to report, she insisted, her eyes wide with something akin to fear. Did anyone else use the staircase regularly? A quick shake of her head. The top apartment was rented, yes, but the tenant was rarely seen. Something mumbled about the building's age, noises being unsurprising. The door clicked shut. Another week bled away, the situation unchanged. Daily, at least once, the shuffling footfalls made their presence known, sometimes circling overhead, sometimes traversing the stairs, up or down. Sometimes my reaction was a moment too slow. Other times I caught the sound in progress, only to find the space vacant. Ms. Arbor remained unmovable without proof of tangible disturbance. The building, she assured me, was structurally sound. A maintenance check of the pipes revealed nothing amiss. One night, determination flared anew. I would confront this. I waited by my door, ear pressed flush against the wood. An hour passed in silence. Then, near midnight, they began. Upstairs, directly above me. They shuffled across the floor, then commenced their descent down the stairs. Timing it precisely, I wrenched the door open at the exact moment the sound should have been passing my threshold. Empty space greeted me, yet the steps continued, undeterred, heading down towards the first floor. I leaned over the railing, gaze plunging into the stairwell shadows. Nothing. The echo of someone descending filled the narrow void, yet no figure, no movement rewarded my straining eyes. My mouth went bone dry. My arms prickled intensely. After a few seconds, the sound dissipated on the ground floor below. I slammed my door shut, locking it, my heart thundering as if I'd run a desperate race. From that point, equilibrium was lost. I existed in a state of perpetual alertness. Sleep became fragmented, elusive. Every trivial noise provoked a startle reflex. A persistent tightness coiled in my chest. Concentration at work fractured, my thoughts inevitably circling back to those phantom footsteps. Coming home meant pausing in the hallway, bracing myself. Some nights offered blessed silence, making the return of the shuffling on other nights feel even more invasive. I'd open my door, scrutinizing the empty air, searching for tricks of light or acoustics, but it felt visceral, tangible. I could sometimes feel a faint vibration through the floorboards, so real, yet utterly incorporeal. Weeks have passed now, mired in this unsettling stasis. Sometimes I speak aloud into the apartment's quiet, addressing the unseen source. Hello? Is anyone there? No reply ever comes. The footsteps never falter, continuing their course until they cease of their own accord. Moments occur when a palpable presence seems to hover just outside my door, the air itself feeling denser, heavier, but the peephole always reveals the same vacant, dimly lit corridor. The conviction hardens. The footsteps belong to something unseen. Fear coils around me, intertwined with an unease too amorphous to name. Moving out flickers as an option. The rent is mercifully low, the apartment itself adequate, but this constant, unnerving companion erodes my peace. Tension should not be the primary occupant of one's home. A friend, upon hearing my hesitant account, offered a dismissive jest about hauntings. I cling to ignorance, uncertain what to believe. I know only what I hear. Slow, dragging footsteps, day and night, pacing overhead, ascending, descending. Thick brick walls swallowing all other sounds, yet inexplicably porous to this one. An empty corridor mirroring my unanswered questions. No explanation forthcoming from neighbor or landlord. Each time the sound begins, my pulse quickens. Activity ceases. Breath grows shallow, a familiar knot tightening in my stomach. I despise the sensation, this feeling of being observed, monitored by an absence. Recording attempts have proven futile, capturing only faint creaks, ambiguous static, nothing that conveys the distinct, chilling reality of the sound. It resists documentation, refuses proof. It is past midnight now. I sit at my small kitchen table, transcribing this experience. The overhead light emits its low, persistent buzz. Beyond the window, the streetlights bleed through the blinds, painting faint stripes across the dim living room. I am waiting, listening, wondering if tonight will bring them again. My pulse thrums a little too quickly. My shoulders ache with tension. A faint creak just echoed from the stairs. The building's settling, or something more. The pattern I know will likely continue. Someone or something walks these stairs, paces the floor above, eternally unseen. I think I hear it again now, starting softly overhead. My heart constricts. A wave of cold washes over me. I will check. I will open the door one more time. Perhaps tonight, finally, I will see. Or perhaps once again, I will only find the emptiness waiting. Those ragged fissures clawed into the motel room plaster. Seeing them was the precise moment I understood my catastrophic error in judgment. But the lock had clicked shut behind me. Night, thick and absolute, was already coiling itself into a nightmare made real. Hours I'd wrestled a wheel, consciousness fraying, the white lines dissolving into hypnotic streams. Then, the Starlight Oasis sign materialized, a smear of lurid pink and electric blue against the oppressive dark, promising sanctuary, oblivion on a questionable mattress. A promise I should have driven past, straight into the dawn. The cracked asphalt lot held only ghosts. Skeletal pickups slumped beside my weary sedan. Inside the office, the air hung heavy, a cloying mix of ancient cigarette smoke and chemical pine. Silas, the proprietor, a man whose face seemed carved from petrified wood, presided over the gloom. He didn't so much glance up as register my presence from behind a flickering cathode ray tube relic, his hand extending with the key to number 13. "Checkout's 11, he rasped, his gaze already snagged by the television's glow. Had I not been so utterly drained, so fixated on the horizontal, I might have registered the tremor in his grip, the way his eyes skittered towards the door as I retreated. Warning flares I was too blind to see. A strange weight seemed to press down as I walked the short distance to my assigned room. The night's stillness punctuated only by the gritty crunch of my soles on gravel and the far-off drone of the interstate. Reaching the door marked 13, a premonition shivered through me, a fleeting static charge on the skin. Road fatigue, I reasoned, dismissing the prickle of unease as I turned the key and pushed inward. Standard desolate motel fare greeted me, wallpaper peeling like sunburnt skin, a bed that bowed mournfully in the middle, a television set that belonged in a museum. But my gaze snagged instantly on the walls. Bathed in the weak moonlight filtering through threadbare curtains, they were savaged. Deep, frantic scores marred the paintwork, a frantic cartography of confinement. They spiderwebbed across every surface, short, violent gashes mingling with long, deliberate gouges that ascended impossibly towards the ceiling. My travel bag thudded to the floor, exhaustion vaporized by a sudden, icy dread. I traced the indentations. Some felt ancient, their edges smoothed by time or resignation. Others looked horrifyingly recent, the paint around them curled back like torn flesh. A glacial chill snaked up my spine. What desperation wrought this? And why leave such brutal evidence unmasked? Instinct screamed, "Leave! Demand another room. Flee this place." I spun towards the door, hand outstretched for the handle. When the sound reached me, a faint, dry, scritching, emanating from within the room itself, I froze, pulse hammering against my ribs. Silence. Then it returned, amplified, insistent. It seemed to originate from the bathroom. Every nerve-ending shrieked retreat, yet some morbid compulsion drew me forward. The scratching intensified, joined now by a low, guttural vibration, a sound that resonated deep in my bones and raised the fine hairs on my arms. My hand, trembling violently, reached for the bathroom doorknob. The instant my fingertips grazed the cold metal, the noises ceased. Utter silence descended, somehow more menacing than the preceding cacophony. How long I stood there, poised between terror and paralysis, I cannot say. My hand remained fused to the knob, eyes locked on the impassive white door. Finally, I forced a backward step, then another, never breaking eye contact. My heel collided with the bed frame. I flinched as if struck. And then I saw it. Protruding slightly from beneath the cheap bed skirt lay a small, leather-bound volume. Its cover was worn, scarred with marks disturbingly similar to those defiling the walls. With hands that shook uncontrollably, I retrieved it. The pages, brittle and yellowed, were crammed with a desperate, near-illegible scrawl. Phrases leapt out, stark against the faded lines. Comes when darkness falls. Avoid the looking glass. The scraping never ends. The final entry, penned in a spidery, faltering hand, read simply, "You're reading this too late. It knows." A deafening bang erupted from the bathroom. The journal tumbled from my grasp. The door shuddered violently in its frame, assault from the other side by immense, rhythmic force. I lunged for the main door, heart a frantic drum against my sternum, clawing at the handle. It wouldn't budge. Locked fast. Panic, cold and suffocating, clawed its way up my throat. The assault on the bathroom door escalated, a frenzy of splintering wood and groaning hinges. My eyes darted wildly, seeking escape. The window. I scrambled towards it, rattling the frame, but it was painted shut, fused tight against the night, the glass thick and unyielding. Turning back, desperate, my gaze inadvertently swept across the tarnished mirror mounted on the opposite wall. For one heart-stopping fraction of a second, a reflection stared back that wasn't mine. A silhouette, hunched and impossibly wrong, its eyes burning with a cold, alien luminescence. I blinked, and the space in the mirror was empty. With a final, explosive crack, the bathroom door imploded, spraying shards of wood across the room. A shape began to emerge from the darkness beyond, something fluid and disjointed, an affront to natural law. I slammed my eyes shut, instinctively recoiling, pressing myself into the furthest corner, making myself small. I heard it move, the wet, ragged sound of its breathing, the scrape of claws, impossibly sharp, across the worn linoleum, drawing nearer. Then the smell hit me, thick and nauseating, rot and stagnant water, overlaid with something metallic and utterly foreign. Eyes clenched tight, I offered silent, incoherent pleas to any indifferent cosmos. The scratching surrounded me now, a symphony of violation on the walls, the floor, closing in, closer. And then, nothing. Absolute silence descended, broken only by the ragged tearing of my own breath. Trembling, consumed by a terror that defied description, I slowly forced my eyelids open. The room was undisturbed, empty. The bathroom door hung intact on its hinges. More jarringly, the walls were smooth, pristine, the cheap paint unmarked. Had I dreamt it all? A fever vision born of exhaustion. But my gaze fell upon the journal, still lying face down on the floor where I'd dropped it. Shaking, I picked it up, flipped it open. Page after page stared back at me, utterly, terrifyingly blank. The escape is a blur. Somehow, I fumbled my way out of that room, out of the starlight oasis, into the sanctuary of my car. I drove without thinking, fleeing eastward until the sun clawed its way above the horizon, and I put two states between myself and that place. I tell myself it was a waking nightmare, a hallucination conjured by fatigue and isolation. Yet sometimes, in the deepest hours of the night, when When the world is hushed, I hear it. That soft, insidious scratching just beyond my bedroom door. A cold certainty settles in my marrow. The presence from that room persists, watches, waits. And sometimes, catching my own reflection unexpectedly, I see a flicker in the glass. Eyes that gleam with an unnatural light. A mouth stretched in a smile revealing far too many teeth. I avoid motels now. Sleep offers little refuge, because the truth is branded onto my soul. Some doors open onto abysses. Shadows fester in the neglected corners of the world, breeding horrors that mock reality. I know one day the scratches will bloom on my own walls. The journal will reappear, its pages filling once more with frantic warnings, and the entity from room 13 will return to conclude its terrifying business. Until that moment, I drive, keep moving, never linger, because motion feels like safety, a desperate illusion I cling to. But the knowledge remains, cold and immutable. You never truly check out of room 13. Not ever. A tremor ran through Elias, yanking him from the depths of sleep into the stale air of his living room. His heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs, his palms slick against the threadbare fabric of the sofa. Across the room, the television cast a pallid, flickering glow, some forgotten infomercial droning into the quiet. He couldn't decipher the words. A strange pressure filled the space, a palpable wrongness that coiled tight in his gut. Pushing himself upright, Elias swiped beads of sweat from his brow, his gaze unwillingly snagged by the shadowed aperture of the hallway leading towards his bedroom. Then, a sound, faint, delicate like the crinkle of brittle paper. His pulse surged. Elias rose, limbs heavy, and moved with hesitant steps toward the source. He paused at the threshold of his bedroom. The sound emanated from within, near the antique dresser squatting beneath the window. He pushed the door inward, the hinges groaning softly, and flicked the switch. Light flooded the room, illuminating the familiar space. The dresser remained closed, though the uppermost drawer was slightly ajar. A dark slit in the pale wood. Another rustle, more distinct this time. The whisper of turning pages, yet nothing visible stirred. A clammy chill traced his spine. Compelled, he forced his feet forward, the rough carpet fibers scratching against his bare soles. His hand, trembling slightly, closed around the cool metal pull of the drawer. A pause, a breath held tight, then he tugged. The scent of aged textiles and dry wood wafted out. Beneath a jumble of t-shirts lay an unfamiliar object, a notebook, stark and unadorned, bound in plain black. He'd never encountered it before. Confusion washed over him, a disorienting wave. Had he shoved it there years prior, a forgotten impulse? No memory surfaced. It bore no title, no inscription, nothing to betray its origin or purpose. He lifted it, its weight surprisingly solid, and fanned through the leaves. Blank. Every single page. Setting it atop the dresser, he stared, his mind a turbulent eddy of unease. Just some random piece of forgotten stationery, he told himself, attempting to quell the disquiet. He slid the drawer shut, retrieved the notebook, and extinguished the light. Back in the living room's gloom, he placed the black-bound volume on the low coffee table and sank onto the sofa, silence amplifying the nascent throb behind his eyes. He killed the television's drone and courted rest. eyes kept snapping back to the inert notebook, a silent sentinel in the dimness. Exhaustion eventually claimed him, dragging him down into a fitful slumber. Morning arrived with a crick in his neck and a metallic tang on his tongue. Elias dressed, the motions automatic, his attention snagged once more by the notebook. Still there, untouched. With a shrug that felt unconvincing even to himself, he brewed coffee, the familiar ritual, a flimsy shield against the lingering strangeness. An idea sparked. Perhaps this anomaly could serve a mundane purpose. He'd been meaning to outline a project. Fetching a pen, he settled at the cramped kitchen table, the notebook open before him. He began sketching out his week's schedule, the pen gliding with deceptive smoothness across the paper's surface. After scribbling a few lines, he closed the cover, noticing nothing amiss in that moment. It felt ordinary, just paper and binding beneath his fingers. Later, however, a distinct, visceral tug pulled at him. An insistent urge guided his hand back to the notebook. He opened it, and his breath hitched, lodging somewhere high in his chest. Pages, previously blank, now teemed with script. A precise, almost archaic hand, penned in faded black ink. His mouth went dry. These were not his notations. They spoke of locales utterly alien, places bearing names that resonated with an unsettling foreignness. Subterranean labyrinths, cyclopean stone altars, rituals cloaked in shadow. His mind spun as he flipped further, the meticulous script detailing hidden chambers, lightless corridors, and instructions for ceremonies involving bizarre, unsettling artifacts. His hands began to shake when one page divulged details about him. Facts held close, secrets unshared even with intimates. It described a faint crescent scar high on his left shoulder, the relic of a clumsy teenage accident. He'd never spoken of it. It was small, easily missed. A wave of dizziness washed over him, his breathing shallow and rapid. He scanned the apartment, a desperate need for reassurance that he was alone gripping him. His heart pounded a heavy, suffocating beat against his sternum. He couldn't tear his eyes from the words, the sharp angles of the letters, the way the ink seemed absorbed into the very fiber of the paper. His fingertips tingled. Snapping the notebook shut, he lurched from the chair, pacing the confines of the kitchen, the linoleum cool beneath his agitated steps. The wall clock's second hand swept with agonizing slowness, each tick magnifying the tension. Keys clenched in his fist, Elias fled the apartment, desperate for open air, for distance. He drove aimlessly, the familiar streets blurring past his unfocused gaze. His head felt thick, heavy, his eyes darting nervously as if expecting some manifestation to coalesce from the mundane traffic. He pulled over at a small, brightly lit coffee shop, the forced normality a jarring contrast to his inner turmoil. Ordering a black coffee he didn't particularly want, he claimed a seat by the window, watching pedestrians drift past under the indifferent sun. Everything outside the glass appeared placid, orderly, yet the image of those ink-filled pages burned behind his eyes. Phrases echoed. Altars. Robed figures. Chanting. Was this a breakdown? Had he, in some fugue state, authored this disturbing narrative himself? The thought soured in his stomach. An hour drifted by before he steered the car back towards his apartment building. Climbing the stairs, unlocking the door, he stepped inside. The notebook waited on the kitchen table, precisely where he'd left it. Yet a distinct chill permeated the air, a subtle drop in temperature that prickled his skin. He approached it warily, his hand hovering before finally making contact. He registered, with a fresh jolt of dread, that more pages bore the harsh, angular script. These new entries spoke of creatures described as elongated shadows, dwellers of deep tunnels beneath aging structures. Sweat trickled down his neck, the frantic pulse in his ears drowning out all other sound. He set the notebook down again, backing away as if from something venomous. His eyes stung. He realized he'd been staring too intensely. Clarity. He needed clarity. Throwing it away felt impossible. Some deeper, morbid curiosity demanded understanding. He seized the notebook, carried it to the living room couch, and deposited it on the coffee table. Sinking into the worn cushions, his leg began an anxious bounce. He reached for his phone, fingers fumbling as he typed search queries. Notebook writes itself. Automatic writing. Haunted objects. The results were predictable. Fiction, folklore, conspiratorial ramblings. Nothing tangible. Heat flushed his face. Rising, he went to the window, gazing down at the street below. Cars slid past. A man ambled by with his dog. Out there, normalcy persisted. Inside, his apartment felt increasingly like a cage. The remainder of the evening dissolved into restless pacing, his gaze repeatedly drawn to the silent black book. Should he read further? Dare he? His thoughts circled obsessively around the mention of his scar. How? What else did this thing know? Midnight approached, exhaustion finally outweighing the anxious energy. He carried the notebook back to the bedroom, placed it inside the dresser drawer once more, and slid it shut. He crawled into bed, mind racing, but his body surrendered to fatigue. Sleep eventually came, thin and troubled. Hours later, a sound sliced through the fragile quiet, jolting him awake. The distinct, papery friction of pages turning. Ice seemed to flood his veins. The sound was clear, intimate, as if someone stood beside his bed, leafing through the notebook. He sat bolt upright, hands trembling violently, heart slamming against his ribs. Fumbling, he found the lamp switch. Warm light spilled across the room, revealing the dresser. The top drawer stood slightly open, just as before. He stared, breath catching in his throat, struggling to regain control. His mouth felt parched, his limbs leaden. Forcing himself out of bed, he moved towards the dresser, the floorboards protesting beneath his weight. He pulled the drawer fully open. The notebook lay within, its pages actively, impossibly, ruffling, as if caught in a phantom breeze. No draft stirred the air. His knees threatened to buckle. He snatched the notebook. Instantly, the movement ceased. The ensuing silence rang in his ears. Clutching the object, Elias fled the bedroom, dropping the notebook onto the coffee table with a thud. He paced the living room, rubbing the back of his neck, his skin feeling hot and tight with anxiety. He couldn't bring himself to open it. Not yet. Sinking onto the couch, he buried his head in his hands, concentrating on slowing his ragged breathing. His mind was a frantic storm, but he forced stillness upon his body. After several long minutes, he stood, locked the bedroom door firmly, and retrieved a spare blanket. Sleep, or some fractured semblance of it, found him on the couch. Dawn arrived gray and unwelcome. His eyes felt gritty, his neck stiff. He regarded the notebook on the table. A grim resolve hardened within him. He had to know if new writing had appeared. Gingerly, he opened it. More pages were filled. They spoke of a place called the Red Mill, a derelict structure on the town's fringe. He'd heard the name whispered, associated with vague rumors of closure decades ago. The notebook instructed him, commanded him, to drive there under the cloak of night. It promised the discovery of a hidden basement. A prickling sensation crawled across his scalp as he absorbed the words. The text described a ritual chamber adorned with unfamiliar sigils, claiming something of importance awaited him there. He couldn't deny the potent, irrational urge to obey. Nausea churned within him, his legs twitching with restless energy. He fought it, tried to rationalize, but the compulsion held fast. By noon, he was pacing again, fingers snapping rhythmically, the apartment walls pressing in. There seemed no alternative, nowhere else to turn. His thoughts kept returning to the Red Mill. He'd just drive by, he reasoned. Just look. Nothing more. Grabbing his jacket, phone, and keys, he left the apartment, the notebook remaining behind on the table. The drive felt unnaturally long, though the mill lay only a few miles beyond the town limits. Its skeletal silhouette eventually emerged at the terminus of a weed-choked gravel road. 2 stories of faded, peeling red paint and boarded-up windows stood stark against the afternoon sky. Tall, dry grass whispered around its foundation. Elias parked on the verge, his throat constricting. The place radiated desolation. He stepped out, a cool wind brushing his face, the crunch of gravel underfoot loud in the stillness. He scanned the surroundings, but no sign of life. Moving closer, he saw the rot afflicting the window boards, the front door hanging askew on broken hinges. He peered inside. Dust motes swam in the shafts of sunlight piercing the gloom. The air hung heavy, stale. The interior was cavernous and empty, save for decaying beams and warped floorboards. He listened intently, straining for any sound beyond the wind's mournful whistle through the cracks. He moved cautiously through the main space, stepping over splintered wood. His skin crawled. The building felt expectant, holding its breath. Every nerve was taut. In a shadowed corner, he spied a staircase descending into darkness. At its base, a heavy padlock secured a sturdy-looking door. His heart gave a heavy thud. A hidden basement. The notebook's words echoed. His hands trembled as he descended the creaking stairs. He rattled the padlock. It felt ancient, immovable. Casting about in the debris littering the landing, his fingers closed around a length of rusted metal. A crowbar. Palms slick with sweat, he jammed the tip into the lock's mechanism. It took considerable effort, straining against the corroded metal. But finally, it yielded with a sharp, percussive crack that reverberated in the enclosed space. His heart hammered against his ribs. He pulled the door open, recoiling from the potent wave of mold and damp earth that billowed out. Coughing, shielding his nose, he fumbled for his phone, activating its flashlight. The beam cut a narrow path through the oppressive darkness, revealing a narrow corridor. The walls wept moisture. The concrete floor was uneven, treacherous. He took hesitant steps forward, chest tightening, mouth instantly dry. The light picked out an archway further down, opening into a larger chamber. Approaching it, stomach twisting, he swept the beam inside. A circular room materialized. Strange markings were carved deep into the stone walls, intricate lines forming bizarre, interlocking patterns that covered every surface. In the center stood a low, smooth stone platform, its surface dark and polished, almost like obsidian. He circled it slowly, flashlight beam probing every recess. His skin tingled, a peculiar pressure building in his ears, as if the air itself had thickened. Besides the glyphs in the platform, the room was utterly bare. A primal urge to flee warred with an equally strong, inexplicable compulsion to remain. His heart pounded so violently it ached. Then he heard it, the soft, dry sound of pages turning. It echoed strangely in the damp, confined space. He spun around, whipping the flashlight beam across the empty corridor, the vacant room. Nothing. No one. The sound persisted for a few seconds, then abruptly ceased, leaving a silence that felt heavier, more threatening. His body began to shake uncontrollably. The notebook was miles away, on his coffee table. Yet the sound had been undeniable. His breathing grew ragged, sweat staining his eyes. He backed towards the archway, intent on escape. Suddenly, footsteps sounded from directly overhead. He froze, every muscle locking. Slow, deliberate treads moving across the floorboards of the room above. He couldn't discern how many, only their unnerving proximity. His heart thundered. He swung the flashlight beam back towards the basement door, half expecting a figure to appear. The footsteps faded. The ensuing silence was somehow worse. Turning, he fled, stumbling back through the archway, scrambling up the stairs, bursting back into the dusty emptiness of the main floor. Still empty. Pulse roaring in his ears, he sprinted outside, across the gravel, fumbling with his car door, throwing himself inside. He slammed the locks down and sat, gasping, hands shaking too badly to immediately grip the steering wheel. Finally, managing to start the engine, he pulled away from the red mill, tires spitting gravel. A sense of incompletion gnawed at him. The notebook had promised he'd find something important, but the basement held only stone and symbols. Had he missed it? Or was this just another step on a path he didn't comprehend? Nausea roiled as he drove back towards the city, the setting sun painting the horizon in bruised oranges and purples. His phone buzzed, a friend suggesting they meet up. He ignored it. His mind was a tangled mess of fear and morbid fascination. Back at his apartment, he hesitated before the door, a new layer of dread settling over him. Unlocking it, he stepped inside. The coffee table was bare. The notebook was gone. His chest tightened painfully. A frantic search of the living room, the kitchen, yielded nothing. His scalp prickled. He moved towards the bedroom, flicked on the light, and saw it. The dresser drawer was open. The notebook sat within, its black cover angled towards him, almost expectantly. He stared, rooted to the spot, unwilling to approach. His breath came in shallow gasps, his forehead clammy. Swallowing hard against the dryness in his throat, he forced himself forward and picked it up. The cover felt unnaturally cold beneath his fingers. It fell open, revealing a fresh entry. The precise script informed him he had made progress, that he was deemed ready for the next stage. It spoke of new locations, further rituals, more complex instructions. His vision swam, his throat constricted. He closed the book, setting it gently back down. What now? He stood motionless in the sudden, profound quiet. They only sound the frantic buzzing in his own ears. Now, sleep offers no true refuge. Each night, as Elias lies rigid on the couch, the bedroom door firmly shut, he hears it, the soft, sibilant turning of pages from beyond the barrier. He wakes each morning to find new entries, the script growing denser, the descriptions more elaborate. They chronicle impossibilities, chthonic tunnels twisting beneath the city, forgotten relics hidden in plain sight, intricate steps required to attain some veiled, ominous objective. They speak of him, too, dissecting his deepest fears, laying bare secrets he thought inviolable. He tells himself this is madness, a waking nightmare, but the ink on the page is undeniably real, and the compulsion to follow, to obey, grows stronger with each sunrise, even as his body trembles with anticipatory terror. He doesn't know the destination. He only knows he is caught in its inexorable current, unable to break free. The more he resists, the tighter the unseen tether becomes. He hears the pages whisper in the dark, and he reads their dictates in the morning light. Each day delivers another fragment of a dreadful mosaic. Each day, he steps further into a landscape he never wished to discover, uncertain how much of his own will remains. Silence possesses a peculiar alchemy, capable of transmuting peace into primal fear within heartbeats. Mere moments before, the campsite slumbered under a velvet quietude, stitched only by the fire's soft hiss, the whisper-thin sigh of leaves, and the creek's distant, aqueous murmur. Stepping from the tent's canvas womb shattered that illusion. A sudden, suffocating density claimed the air, strangling the night. The cherished solitude curdled instantly into exposure, a vulnerability demanding flight. This midnight vigil wasn't part of the plan. We'd sought refuge here, myself and companions bound by shared escape, craving a weekend untethered from the world's hum. Simplicity was the mantra. Canvas shelters, fire-licked meals, a ceiling of infinite stars. Elias, whose friendship ran deeper than years, had unearthed this sanctuary online, promising unparalleled seclusion, true communion with the wild. His initial assessment held true. Perfection, raw and untamed. Yet now, bathed in the fire's anemic glow, the tent a fragile shell at my back, regret coiled cold and sharp within me. Drawn towards the pulsing heart of the embers, I sought solace in their warmth, a futile ward against the dread scaling my spine. The woods held their breath, an absolute void where sound should have been. Only when the forest's intricate symphony, the drone of night insects, the far-off cry of unseen creatures, abruptly ceases do you comprehend its vital presence. Now, only a profound, unnerving stillness reigned. And then, etched into the damp earth, I found them. Elias had casually mentioned tracks earlier, dismissed as the ghost of some prior hiker. These, however, were starkly fresh, disturbingly numerous, describing a deliberate perimeter around our vulnerable shelters. Immense prints, far exceeding any human measure, pressed deep, too deep for casual passage. My pulse hammered against my ribs. Kneeling, tracing the sharp edge of one depression, the cold truth settled. This wasn't random wandering. This was surveillance, a methodical orbit. Something had paced here, patiently, while we dreamt. Rising, the 1,000 icy needles prickled my skin, that primal certainty of unseen eyes fixed upon my back. A slow, deliberate turn surveyed the Stygian tree line beyond the fire's reach. Nothing stirred, yet the weight of that invisible gaze remained, oppressive and unwavering. Urgency propelled me to Elias's tent. Kneeling, my whisper sliced the quiet. "Elias, wake up, now." A muffled groan, a rustle of nylon. Time is it? Doesn't matter, I hissed, eyes darting towards the shadowed woods. "Get out here." My tone, raw with something he instantly recognized, pulled him from sleep's grip. He emerged, blinking, disoriented. "What is it?" My gesture needed no words. He followed the damning arc of prints, his face draining of color in the firelight. A long silence stretched, heavy with unspoken fear, before he finally looked from the earth to the impenetrable forest wall. An animal. The question felt foolish even as I voiced it. Elias shook his head, his voice low, taut. "No, not like this. Too deliberate." A clammy chill traced my spine. Not someone. Something. Elias voiced the imperative, his whisper barely audible. "Wake the others." I nodded mutely. We moved with frantic quiet, rousing Finn and Maya. Initial sleepy protests evaporated the instant their eyes registered the pattern in the dirt, replaced by the same stark terror gripping us. "Gods, what is that?" Finn breathed, eyes wide. "Who comes out here?" "Exactly," Elias countered, his gaze sweeping the darkness. "This isn't some lost soul." Maya hugged herself against the night air, shivering from more than cold. "We can't stay, not knowing." Her words hung there, undeniable. Yet, the alternative? Plunging into that ink-black wilderness, navigating a treacherous path by feeble light. A gamble potentially worse than waiting. We huddled near the flames, a small knot of fear debating impossible choices, the phantom pressure of unseen observation, a constant, suffocating presence. The debate died unborn. A sharp crack split the silence, wood splintering under weight, distant but undeniable. We froze, heads snapping towards the sound. Silence. Then closer this time, another snap, followed by the distinct rhythmic crunch of footfalls through dry leaves, measured, unhurried, as if concealment was no longer a concern. My hand closed around the flashlight, its beam sliced into the void, illuminating only dancing leaves and deeper shadows beyond. "What is that?" Finn's whisper was ragged. "No idea," Elias breathed, fear stark in his eyes. "Move. Now." Abandoning all but essentials, we scrambled away from the fire's dying sanctuary. Behind us, the footsteps answered, louder now, falling into a relentless cadence that matched our hurried retreat. A backward glance, a sweep of the light. Nothing but trees and the persistent, chilling certainty of pursuit. Faster we moved, breath tearing at our lungs, the path towards the creek seeming impossibly remote, each stride an eternity. Another sound ripped through the night, terrifyingly close. A brittle snap, instantly followed by a low, visceral vibration. Less a growl, more a guttural resonance unlike any beast I knew. It coiled icy dread in my gut. I spun, light beam stabbing backwards. Emptiness greeted me. "The creek," Elias urged, voice strained. "Almost there." We plunged into the shallow water, the icy shock momentarily stealing breath, scrambling up the opposite bank where the trail widened, promising escape. A wave of fragile relief broke, then shattered. Behind us, the pursuit ceased, abruptly. The world fell into a vacuum of sound, a silence more terrifying than the chase. Then, peripherally, to our right, motion. My light jerked sideways, catching a fleeting impression. Something impossibly tall, skeletal, cloaked in shadow, melting back between ancient trunks. Gone before the image could fully register, yet the certainty remained. It was there. It saw us. "Run!" Elias roared. We bolted. Pure, adrenaline-fueled flight down the path, lungs screaming, muscles burning, the thunder of heavy footfalls erupting from the trees behind, gaining ground with terrifying speed. No looking back. Only the frantic dance of the flashlight beam on the path ahead. An eternity compressed into moments, ending only when we burst, gasping, into the moonlit clearing, the blessed silhouette of the cars before us. Gear flung, doors slammed, engine roaring. We tore away, gravel spitting defiance at the oppressive woods. The miles dissolved beneath the tires in a shared, suffocating silence. Only much later, with the tree line a distant memory, did I risk a glance in the rearview mirror. Empty road, endless night. Yet the forest's edge remains imprinted behind my eyes, and the conviction lingers, cold and certain. Whatever paced the darkness around our fragile firelight that night remains, watching, waiting, and its territory is a place I will never trespass again. Perhaps the silence settled incrementally, like dust, unnoticed, until a stutter in the overhead bulb plunged the room into a momentary twilight, jarring me awake to the profound stillness. I stood rooted in my grandfather Arthur's study, the fringe of a threadbare Persian rug snagging my sock. In my hand rested the pocket watch he'd bequeathed me, its silver body unexpectedly heavy, preternaturally cold. Its chain hung limp, inert. Thrice I'd attempted to wind it, coax its hands past the immutable hour of 3 lining. But they remained frozen, 2 stark pointers mocking my efforts with their rigid finality. A difficult swallow. The air hung thick and stagnant, tasting of decades unopened. Paneled walls, dark as old blood, leaned close, the silence a physical weight, breeding a suffocating intimacy with the room. I recalled the day I'd crossed the threshold of this groaning edifice, Arthur's legacy. Its inherent eeriness had always been a known quantity, a low hum beneath the surface of visits past, but never had I anticipated this. Now, with the timepiece clutched tight, each inhalation felt labored, drawn through unseen resistance. A prickle of ice traced patterns across my arms, raising the fine hairs on my neck. Turning the watch over revealed intricate geometries, spirals coiling into sharp angles, marring its silver carapace. These cryptic sigils seemed to pulse faintly under my fingertips. I pressed the small crown. It resisted for a heartbeat, then yielded with a reluctant click. Within, the face wasn't glass, but polished obsidian, mirroring my own distorted features, eyes wide beneath a furrowed brow. The mere sight sent a tremor through my gut. Simultaneously, the ambient temperature plummeted. My exhalation ghosted white before my face. And then, a sound beneath sound, less a whisper than the memory of one, slithering at the edge of hearing like a razor, drawn lightly over skin. My heart gave a frightened leap. A swift scan of the study, The hulking oak desk buried under strata of yellowed documents, the spectral shape of the armchair draped in shadow, revealed nothing, only the lingering resonance of that half-formed syllable, dark and ancient, clinging to the corners of the room. Retreating to the corridor, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, I fumbled for the switch. Light sputtered from the hall fixture, painting the peeling floral wallpaper in shivering strokes. My pulse throbbed in my ears. My free hand touched my forehead, finding it slick with cool perspiration. Something was fundamentally askew, a deep wrongness settling into the marrow of the house, and I was caught within it. Yet, what recourse? This was my inheritance, my shelter. Departure at this hour felt unthinkable, directionless. Snapping the watch shut offered a fleeting, perhaps imagined, reprieve. The chill lessened by a fraction. I turned toward the living room, seeking solace, clarity, the mundane ritual of tea. But stepping across the threshold precipitated a disorienting lurch, a nauseating slide through space. One moment, the doorway. The next, inches from the television's blank, accusing screen. A blink, a gasp. How? Had consciousness fragmented? The mantel clock declared 9:12 p.m. My mobile, retrieved with shaking fingers, confirmed 9:14. Close enough, sanity pleaded, grasping at straws, but a watch nestled heavy in my palm, clung stubbornly to its frozen trinity. A broken heirloom, I told myself, just a defunct mechanism. Why then did the hairs on my nape still stand erect, sensing an unseen gaze? Sinking onto the sofa, I forced measured breaths, in, out. My lungs felt constricted, unwilling. The quiet deepened, becoming viscous, tactile. Then overhead, the distinct cadence of soft footfalls on bare boards. Deliberate, measured, impossible. The attic held only dust and forgotten things, boxes sealed against time. Yet the steps persisted, pacing directly above. My chest tightened. Scrabbling to my feet, the watch's chain clinked against the coffee table as I set it down, driven now by a desperate need to confront the impossible, to disprove the evidence of my own ears. I ascended the groaning staircase, throat parched, each riser a sigh underfoot. The attic door loomed at the corridor's end. My hand, trembling, closed on the icy knob. Pushing it inward released a breath of mold and decay. Dust motes danced in the weak shaft of light spilling from the hall. I located the pull chain for the naked bulb dangling from the rafters. It flickered, threatened, but held, casting a pallid glow over the jumbled landscape of trunks, defunct lamps, and Arthur's archaic tools. No one. Of course. Silence, save for the frantic drumming in my own chest. The air smelled thick with varnish and time. Turning to retreat, my gaze snagged on something half hidden behind a wooden crate. A slim volume bound in worn leather. Retrieving it, I recognized the embossed sigil on its cover, the same unsettling geometry adorning the watch. I flipped through pages filled with Arthur's precise, spidery script. Fragmented phrases leaped out, chilling in their resonance. Temporal siphon, recursive loop, ensnared at the third hour. The timepiece feeds. My chest constricted as if bound by iron bands. Snapping the journal closed seemed to trigger it. The bare bulb overhead convulsed, plunging the attic into darkness before flaring with agonizing brilliance. Vertigo seized me, the floor tilting violently. I stumbled, catching myself against a dusty trunk. When the world steadied and I pulled open the attic door, the hallway below seemed dimmer. Shadows pooled deeper, more menacing. My phone's screen glowed with the time. 10:25 p.m. An hour, perhaps more, bled away in those few disoriented moments upstairs. Downstairs, the watch waited on the coffee table, exactly as I'd left it. Yet something had shifted within me. A strange numbness bloomed in my arms, a heavy tingling. Pushing up my sleeves revealed faint tracery lines mapping my skin. The watch's geometry, shallowly inscribed, bloodless and cold as the metal itself. Panic, sharp-toothed, gnawed at my core. Frantically, I rubbed at the marks. They remained indifferent. In the bathroom mirror's stark glare under a buzzing fluorescent tube, my reflection looked spectral. Cold water splashed on my face did little to dispel the encroaching dread. Then I saw it. The pattern on my right forearm had elaborated, a delicate spiral blooming near my elbow, even as I watched, intricate and alien. Touching it yielded no sensation, only the sight of the haunting design. A sibilant breath, wordless and chilling, coiled from the hallway. I bolted, leaving damp footprints on the worn linoleum. The watch, when I next glanced at it, seemed to possess a greater density, as if absorbing my mounting terror. My phone, inexplicably drained, refused connection. Outside, wind moaned, rattling panes that showed only impenetrable blackness, a starless, moonless void. The next interval, hour, minutes, passed in a fugue state. Time became fluid, treacherous. Water heated for tea was instantly cold to the touch moments later. A candle lit in the kitchen reappeared, clutched in my hand in the hall, half consumed, wax dripping unfelt onto my skin. Through it all, the watch remained sentinel at 3 St. Wales. Its obsidian face a dark mirror I increasingly dreaded. Answers, however, were imperative. Perhaps closer scrutiny held a key. Reluctantly, I returned to Arthur's study, seating myself at the desk, the leather-bound notebook beside me. With forced resolve, I pressed the crown again. The tiny door creaked open. My reflection stared back, wild-eyed, trapped in the miniature abyss. But behind it, superimposed like a watermark on reality, shimmered another visage, gaunt, angular, its eyes like hollow sockets, a phantom behind the polished surface. A strangled gasp, I snapped it shut. The lamp overhead flickered violently, then died. Darkness roared, absolute and suffocating, filled with insinuating whispers that bypassed ears to needle directly into thought. The cold became absolute, a physical presence. My breath hitched in ragged gasps. Fumbling, I found the desk lamp's chain, yanking it with a prayer. As weak light returned, I found the watch inexplicably back in my trembling hand. The intricate tracery now covered my arms completely, spreading across my shoulders. A beautiful, terrifying second skin. A scream built in my throat, but I swallowed it down, choking on panic. Action was needed. This cursed artifact had to be expelled. Stumbling through the corridor, nearly upsetting a porcelain vase, I lurched toward the front door. My intent was primal. Cast it out, bury it, shatter its hold. But the latch, solid and unyielding, refused to turn. I pulled, twisted, rattled it futilely, shouting wordless frustrations into the unresponsive hallway. The whispers seemed to titter, mocking my efforts. My ears rang. The door remained steadfastly shut. Heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird, I turned to the nearest window, heaving at the sash. sealed tight. The house had become a prison. Cursing, I paced the living room, the overhead light flickering with malicious rhythm. Each flicker seemed to steal a sliver of time. Each frantic pulse of my heart felt sluggish, as if the watch were warping the very tempo of my existence. Destruction, then. Total annihilation. Arthur's old hammer, heavy and purposeful, lay in a kitchen drawer. With hands that shook uncontrollably, I placed the watch upon the sturdy dining table. I raised the hammer, the polished metal of its head catching the dim light. As the hammer arced downward, aimed true, utter blackness swallowed the room. Simultaneously, an icy grip, inhumanly strong, clamped onto my descending wrist, arresting the blow. When light flickered uncertainly back, my hand was empty. The hammer lay inert on the floorboards. The watch was gone from the table, and the patterns, the sigils, now flowed seamlessly across my arms and chest, intricate as lace, terrifyingly permanent. My breathing came in shallow, painful bursts. There was no escaping it, only confronting it. Staggering back to the study, I found the notebook open on the desk, though I had no memory of leaving it so. A single sentence stood stark against the aged paper. Arthur's script, a final plea or instruction. To break the loop, confront the mirror. Refuse its toll. My hand trembled, but I retrieved the watch. Where had it reappeared from? Beside the notebook, innocently waiting. Opening it felt like leaping into an abyss. There I was, reflected small and desperate in the obsidian depths. There it was, the spectral observer behind my eyes, clearer now, almost tangible. Tears blurred my vision, hot against my cold skin. I clenched my jaw, forcing the words out. A ragged whisper first, then gaining strength, echoing in the unnatural quiet. My time is not yours to take. It is mine. A violent electrical surge coursed through me, throwing me back against the desk. The house lights strobed, a frantic pulse speed of illumination and void, the whispers rising to a shriek that vibrated in my bones. Then, silence. Blessed, steady light. Warmth seeped back into the air, chasing the bone-deep chill. The watch lay face up in my palm, still reading 3 solid queer. But the oppressive weight, the sense of being watched, had lifted, fractionally. On my arms, the intricate patterns began to recede, fading like old scars, though faint ghost lines remained, etched reminders. Shakily, I placed the watch on the desk. My legs felt weak as I moved into the hallway. At the front door, the latch turned easily under my touch. Cool, clean night air flooded my lungs as I stumbled onto the porch, gasping like a drowning man saved. Freedom, perhaps. But pausing on the threshold, glancing back through the study window, I saw the watch on the desk, its dark face catching the porch light. In its miniature reflection of the doorway where I stood, I could swear I saw it again. That hollow-eyed shape hovering just behind my image, its thin lips curved in a smile of patient amusement. The faint lines on my skin tingled, a phantom itch. This house, this watch, it had released me, yes, allowed me this reprieve. But the chill clinging to my bones, the echo of whispers in the silence, whispered that 3 was not an ending, merely a pause. It was waiting. And as I pulled the heavy door closed behind me, the click of the latch sounded unnervingly like the ticking of a clock resuming its count. The memory clings, sharp as broken glass. The first night the phone fractured the silence. Midnight was breathing down the neck of the old commercial edifice, where I, Elias, keep watch. Night Porter, that's the title. Though Guardian of Echoes feels more apt these years I've haunted its dimming corridors. After 9, the building exhales, shedding the day's hustle. Offices shuttered by 6, cleaning crews evaporated by 8, leaving just me, the hum of dormant machinery, and the unblinking eyes of security feeds. By 12, even the hall lights throttle down, conserving power, steeping the place in a profound, familiar emptiness. But that night, the familiar cracked. I was sunk deep in the lobby's worn swivel chair, behind the grand, deserted reception desk. On the small, muted television, flickering images of some vapid late-night spectacle played to an audience of none. A single earbud fed me low-volume talk radio, a bulwark against encroaching sleep. Then it happened. The intercom phone on the desk, an antiquated thing, erupted not with a ring, but a harsh, guttural buzz that jolted me upright. A glance confirmed the wall clock's stark decree. Precisely midnight. Lifting the receiver, my voice emerged raspy, unused. Lobby. A tremor betrayed me. That phone seldom stirred past 10, let alone on the witching hour's chime. Silence stretched, taut and expectant, for 3, maybe 4 seconds. Then a man's voice, level as a still lake, unnervingly calm. I have a delivery for you. Something yours. Lost, a long time gone. A cold current snaked up my arms. His certainty was absolute, implying a shared knowledge I utterly lacked. My throat felt tight. Meaning what? I managed. Who is speaking? Which floor? Another pause, pregnant with unspoken things. Ascend. I am on your floor. The line clicked dead. I stood frozen, the receiver pressed hard against my ear, listening to the vacant hiss that replaced him. The phone's small green display glowed. Call origin. Floor 13. Impossible. This monolith topped out at 12 stories. I stared, confounded, before slowly lowering the handset. My heart hammered against my ribs. My mouth was dessert dry. My gaze swept the lobby. Familiar brass fixtures gleamed under the entrance lights, reflecting my own image in the glass doors. Uniforms slightly rumpled, a bead of sweat tracing a path down my temple. Usually, the quiet was so complete, I could discern the whisper of the ceiling fans. Tonight, a faint ringing persisted in my own ears, my body's frantic telegraphy against the inexplicable. Pushing away from the desk, I crossed the marble expanse towards the elevator bank. The call button depressed with its usual soft click. An elevator arrived promptly, its doors sighing open. I stepped inside. The overhead light flickered erratically, a common ailment in this aging structure. My eyes scanned the button panel, 1 through 12, plus B for basement. No 13 naturally. Superstition had excised it from the building's physical reality. I pressed 12. The ascent felt sluggish, heavy. Ordinarily, the shift in pressure registered around the 6th floor, a slight lurch in the gut. Tonight, only a tightening knot of tension. The doors parted on the 12th floor. Dim emergency lighting painted the corridor in long shadows. The air hung stale and motionless. This level housed a small insurance firm, long since departed for the night. Every office door stood locked and dark. I walked the length, testing handles, peering through glass panels. Nothing. No one. Defeated, I returned to the elevator. Perhaps a prankster in the basement, fiddling with the ancient phone system. I pressed B. The car descended, down in the subterranean storage warren, amidst stacked boxes and forgotten cleaning supplies. I found the basement phone. Thick dust coated its surface. Lifting the receiver yielded only a mundane dial tone. It hadn't been touched in ages. Replacing it, I rode back to the lobby's relative sanctuary. The remainder of my shift unfolded in profound silence, yet the unease clung like damp wool. The next night mirrored the last, tranquility reigning until the stroke of 12. Then, the desk phone buzzed, insistent. The display flared. 13. My pulse leaped. Hello. I breathed into the receiver. The same dispassionate voice replied. Elias. Ascend. I hold what you lost. My voice strained. What? What did I lose? A brief silence then. You will recognize it. Come to my floor. A surge of frustration made me retort, almost shouting, There is no 13th floor. Click. Gone. This time, I made no attempt to investigate. Rooted behind the desk, palms slick with sweat, I tapped an agitated rhythm against the tile. My eyes kept straying to the elevators, expectant, fearful. The security monitors showed only deserted hallways across 12 floors in the basement. Stillness everywhere, except for the frantic drumbeat within my own chest. The desire to flee warred with the duty chaining me there until dawn. At 6 a.m., the building stirred back to life, the first wave of early workers arriving. I escaped into the morning light, seeking sleep that wouldn't come, haunted by that calm, knowing voice. Days later, I broached the subject with the building manager. He offered a shrug, mumbled about the antiquated internal phone lines, potential cross-wiring, a 13th floor in the building's blueprints. He didn't know. Records were patchy for a structure this old. A glitch in the phone's display, perhaps. Plausible deniability. It didn't explain the voice knowing my name, the claim of a lost item. My shifts became vigils. I patrolled obsessively before midnight, checked connections, scanned monitors. All remained normal until the clock struck 12. Then, the buzz, the glowing 13, the unwavering voice. Elias, I have it for you. Lost so long ago. Come up. My questions about his identity were met with silence or the chillingly simple, "You know me," always followed by the click. After a week of this nocturnal ritual, resolve hardened within me. Or perhaps it was frayed nerves demanding conclusion. As midnight approached, I stood waiting by the phone. It buzzed on cue. I answered. "I am waiting," the voice stated. "The elevator is open." The line died, pulse throbbing in my temples. I walked to the elevators. One car stood waiting, doors agape, its interior light pulsing like a weak heart. An elevator doesn't just open and wait. I stepped inside. The familiar panel, 1 to 12, B. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw it, a subtle luminescence bleeding from the smooth steel between 12 and B. Not a button, more the ghost of one, faintly etching the number 13. My finger, trembling slightly, pressed the illuminated spot. Nothing. Then, with a soft hiss, the doors slid shut. The ascent began slower this time, viscous, dragging. My breath hitched. I watched the numbers climb. 10, 11, 12, then darkness. The indicator remained blank, yet the car continued its upward crawl, cables groaning in protest. It stopped abruptly, A jolt that rattled my teeth. The doors opened onto a place I'd never seen. Dim light revealed a short hallway. Walls stained, paint peeling like sunburnt skin. The carpet underfoot was threadbare, patterned with ancient spills. A faint, musty odor permeated the air, mold and stagnant time. It was cold, unnaturally so, a draft whispering from an unseen source, though no windows were visible. Hesitantly, I stepped out, keeping one foot poised on the elevator threshold. 3 doors punctuated the corridor, 2 left, 1 right. All bore the scars of age, chipped paint, tarnished nameplates rendered illegible by time. Silence, thick and absolute, save for the frantic drumming of my own heart in my ears. I forced myself forward. Behind me, the elevator doors slid shut with unnerving finality. I spun. No call button on this side. Just blank, indifferent wall. My throat constricted. I tried the first door on the left. Locked. A soft knock yielded nothing. The second, identical. Locked. The door on the right stood slightly ajar. From within seeped a low, flickering buzz, the death rattle of an old fluorescent tube. Palms damp, I pushed it open. The room beyond was stark, cracked plaster walls, bare concrete floor. A single, sputtering light fixture overhead cast erratic shadows. In the room's center stood a plain wooden table. Upon it rested a small metal box, perhaps 6 inches square, secured by a simple latch. Apprehension prickled my skin. The room felt vacant, yet intensely watched. The fine hairs on my arms lifted. I approached the table, breathing shallowly. My fingers fumbled with the latch. It sprang open. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, lay a ring. A simple silver band, oxidized by time. Recognition struck like a physical blow. My wife. My ex-wife. Her ring. Lost years ago. Dropped in some forgotten parking lot. Vanished forever. Or so I'd thought. I picked it up. Cold metal. Turning it over, I saw the tiny, familiar scratch on the inner curve. Real. My stomach churned. Holding the ring tight, its chill seeping into my skin, I scanned the empty room again. Nothing. Then, behind me, a phone began to ring. I startled, turning. In a dim corner previously unnoticed, sat an old black rotary phone on the floor, coated in dust. It rang again, a shrill, insistent summons that sent adrenaline searing through me. I crossed the room, lifted the heavy bakelite receiver. Before I could speak, the voice, that same flat, calm tone. "It is yours. Do not lose it again." My own voice was a shaky whisper. "Who are you?" A beat of silence. "You know me." Click. Dial tone. Replacing the handset, I stood trembling, the need to escape overwhelming. Back in the hallway, I looked for the elevator. The wall was seamless, solid. Panic flared. I touched a spot where the doors had been. Only cold, unyielding plaster met my fingers. My hands shook violently. I rattled the locked doors again, desperate. Then behind me, the soft chime of an elevator's arrival. I whirled around. The doors stood open, the flickering light within beckoning. I scrambled inside, jabbing the button marked lobby. The doors closed. The descent was jarringly swift, my stomach plummeting. 10 seconds, maybe less, and the doors opened onto the familiar, blessedly normal lobby. I stumbled out, gasping, the silver ring clutched in my fist. The lobby was unchanged. The wall clock read 12:05 a.m. Only 5 minutes had passed. It felt like hours, an age. I stood there catching my breath, my shirt plastered to my back with cold sweat. The vast space was empty, the front doors securely locked, streetlights casting pale lozenges of light onto the pavement outside. I retreated to the desk, placed the ring on the polished surface, and stared at it. Relief warred with profound disorientation. How? The question echoed in the cavern of my mind, finding no purchase. The rest of the night passed in watchful silence. The phone remained mute. When my replacement arrived at dawn, I fled home, drained and shaky, sleep an impossibility. The following night, midnight came and went without incident, and the night after. The calls from the 13th floor ceased as abruptly as they had begun. I checked the elevator panel daily. The faint glow between 12 and B was gone. Pressing the spot yielded nothing. Everything was precisely as it should be, as it always had been. I carry the ring now, always, tucked deep in my pocket, its cold weight a constant, tangible reminder. The building manager offers no insights beyond faulty wiring theories that satisfy no one, least of all me. No other staff reported strange calls. No one else glimpsed a phantom floor. But I know. The memory is indelible. The smell of decay, the sputtering light, the chill of the metal box, the vice of fear tightening in my chest. The sound of that voice, instructing me not to lose the ring again. I remain here, Elias, night porter in this tower of sleeping commerce. Each time the phone rings after midnight, my breath catches, my heart quickens. It's always mundane. A late working tenant, a security query from another site. No more calls from nowhere, no more spectral invitations. Yet sometimes near midnight, I find myself gazing at the elevator bank, watching the lights ascend and descend, wondering. A sliver of me craves another summons, demands answers, but a larger part recoils, remembering the visceral chill, the suffocating mystery. There are no neat explanations. There is only the job, the quiet, the waiting, and the ring, heavy in my pocket. I won't lose it again.